podcast as part of the TrekSphere network.
To find more Star Trek-related content, visit TrekSphere.com. I wish that I could come up with a new intro every time. Obviously, proper Star Trek and not just whatever. That one's a little bit easier because I'm like, what was that episode? But how do I greet everyone? Ni hao. As you know, this is The Measure of an Episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek and not just the Twilight Zone. I'm Jonathan.
But like a disappointing Twilight Zone.
Well, kind of. I have one big issue with this episode, but other than that, I enjoyed it. So it's a yes for me. All right, let's see what we're watching next.
And I'm Paul, and the criteria by which we judge these episodes, number 1, is there science fiction explored throughout the plot? Number 2, is that science fiction novel or unique in some way? Number 3, is there a moral dilemma presented throughout the episode? And I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan, and this week we walked Projections, which is supposed to be episode 18 of season 1, but it got cut short, so it was episode 3 of season 2 of the Star Trek, The Voyager, where the blurb says...
The program for the emergency medical hologram is activated due to what the computer describes as a ship-wide emergency. So this started out as my favorite Voyager episode.
And then the close open ended.
Yeah.
And then the theme song started.
Yeah. Then the cold open ended, and I was like, oh, right, I'm watching Voyager.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot.
You're like the EMH on Next Generation. I don't remember that. Oh, right.
Yeah. But it does open really cool.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a problem is if the computer were to activate the EMH because there's some ship-wide emergency, why wouldn't it immediately tell it what the problem is? Why does the emergency medical hologram have to ask, what's going on? Why did you...
That is an excellent point.
Or at least, why wouldn't it initiate the emergency medical hologram already with the information Bluetoothed over to it,
Right. Or why does it wait until the emergency is over?
Because it's a passive-aggressive computer.
Right.
Oh, you finally decided to show up. Well, guess what?
Nothing you can do now.
Yeah. But it's a great mystery. I was kind of hooked. I thought I was like, I'm going to take this off of 1.5 speed because this might be good enough to watch on 1 speed or regular speed.
And did you think it was?
For the cold open, yeah. I thought it was. And I think the subsequent acts, it sort of just declined steadily for me.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of things. So the EMH materializes, asks the computer what's going on. The computer says, hey, there's nobody on the ship.
Yep.
And the doctor's like, well, that's strange. Cold open is done. It's like, oh, short but sweet.
It's the second shortest cold open, just so you know.
Oh, really? What's the first?
We're not there yet.
I didn't see that episode.
I'm sorry, it's Are We There Yet? It's the episode
which seems like an on-the-nose title for an episode of Voyager. We're not there yet.
Oh, that would have been so good. So I just said, Are We There Yet? And it would have been so good if there was an Naomi Wildman episode that was just Are We There Yet?
So here's where it starts to decline, is when the EMH, the doctor, sees that he's all by himself, is sort of powerless to do anything. So he starts to leave a log. And I thought to myself, okay, so he just starts to, he's going to terminate his own program. Why not have him do some sort of investigating, right? Why not have him find a certain way to question or inquire the computer, kind of go down sort of a Geordie type of, I'm going to talk to the computer now, and we're going to get sort of little bits of information that are either endemic to the mystery or just something for us to hold on to. Okay. And maybe for some reason the doctor wants to look outside of the medical bay. Uh-huh. And he knows he can't go across the bounds of the medical bay, but one or another,
obviously,
he realizes that he can, right? Some accident or something like that. He can see that he can, and that sort of progresses us to the next part of the mystery. Oh, he can leave for some reason. Why? And then that leads us to the next one. Kind of like the last episode, what is it called? Timescape?
Uh-huh.
Timescape. And they find a little bit of information that leads them to the next little part, right? They find out that, solve that little mystery, leads them to the next part. It's like, why not have this little compounding mystery happening? But he just decides to, I'm just going to terminate my program, the end. And then B'Elanna comes in. And this is the part where it's sort of transitioned from, because B'Elanna comes in and she says, we're having some trouble with the sensors. All these things are happening. We get reported a lot of information. And it started to feel like a soap opera a little bit, where we don't get to see anything happen. We just get to see characters report what did happen. We don't get to experience anything.
Right. I mean, yeah, but that whenever you have a character-focused episode, you run that risk because they're either in the middle of action everywhere, and they're kind of like what's the guy equivalent of a Mary Sue? Because I know that anyway. You know
a Harry Sue, maybe a Harry Sue,
right? Harry Lou, Jerry Lewis. Is that what it is?
Jerry Lewis. Okay, well,
so they're just in the middle of everything, mucking it up, going, "Lady."
A reference no one will get. No one.
That's not true. Animaniacs is back.
Yeah, but they're referencing someone who has been
right.
Like, what was that? 70 years ago, he was doing that bit.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm not that old.
Timely reference. Right. Timely reference.
Yeah, I like to keep it topical. But anyway, you run the risk of them being in the middle of everything and having really unfortunate or really amazing timing, or you have to have instances like this where they are talking about what happened and the person. And the thing that I agree with you that it is frustrating, but the thing that I like is that it's almost a running gag with the emergency medical hologram because he's not allowed to leave, so everybody has to tell him what's happened,
what's going on.
Yeah.
But that's what I thought was going to be interesting about this episode, is that here you have a character who is normally confined to the medical bay,
right? But
he has to reason and intuit his way out of the medical bay, either by his own intellect or Deus Ex Machina, however he gets out of there,
right, to
solve the mystery. And that was going to be the fun part for me, except the part where, that's not going to happen. They're just going to have more and more information reported to us. And, I actually tell me what you think about this. I actually started to feel like something was wrong right when the tricorders wouldn't register life signs.
Oh, for sure.
Or anybody's life signs. I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because they first say it and he says, this tricorder isn't working on you.
Yeah, like it. They say that nobody's on the ship. Then right before he kills himself, B'Elanna appears. But the tricorder isn't working on her. Like, you just learned that nobody is on the ship. So instead of she does cover it by saying that the sensors are, kind of everything's malfunctioning anyway. But so I guess I could see that as being a little bit of a struggle. But when you pull another tricorder and it's not working, and then you try another tricorder on Janeway and that's not working, like, something's up.
Right. It just started to feel that way.
Yeah.
And this is a ruse.
And he doesn't acknowledge it at all. He's like, the tricorders aren't working. Well, you're the doctor?
I know. I mean, it seems like, I guess he has to take everybody's word for it because he's only a doctor. He has no intuition outside of that. At least that's sort of the idea with the EMH.
He's a doctor, not an empath.
Exactly. So this is sort of the difference between a really good mystery on Next Gen versus a really good mystery on Voyager, which is we're kind of ahead of the game here. Whereas I'm sure the design of the writing was that we're not supposed to be, at least at this point when the tricorder does not register a life sign in B'Elanna for the first time, we're not supposed to be like, wait a minute, something's fishy here. I think we're supposed to take their word for it at this point,
right,
and continue along with it. Whereas in Next Gen, you buy everything that happens.
Right.
This episode is kind of a companion episode to that Crusher episode where all the crew members start disappearing, everyone, slowly.
Okay. Right.
It's kind of like that. It's just in reverse, I guess. And it kind of feels that way, but just not as well written or executed at all, because it kind of just falls apart as time goes on.
Right.
As opposed to escalating, it de-escalates, I guess.
Well, yeah, and it... I will say for the Crusher TNG episode, the response is always the same. Like, who is that person? What are you talking about? They've never been on this crew. That kind of thing. And this one, they kept adding more people, but the answer again was kind of the same. Like Well, no, I guess it wasn't the same. So I'm going to back that up.
Well, it was on Voyager, the explanation was this long, drawn-out technobabble thing of them trying to explain it away. Whereas in Next Gen, it was an answer, and then we weren't trying to figure out what was going to happen next. They had us until the next moment.
Right.
Whereas we weren't just waiting for the next part to just get through this, to break through this story hymen so we can get to the next part. I couldn't think of another word that accurately represented what I wanted to say.
I mean, why not just use the super generic barrier? Like,
nope, not descriptive enough. Not enough pain implied.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Graphic.
So, and then they say, oh, we need you to go to the bridge because Janeway is hurt. And we've been installing these hollow emitters that we didn't tell you about, but we've been installing them. And so you can now go to the bridge. And so they transfer him to the bridge. And it was kind of cool for him to say, oh, I thought it was bigger, which is a kind of an acknowledgement, a fun acknowledgement that the EMH has never seen the bridge before. You know, we've seen it, so we think everybody on the ship has seen it, but he has not.
Right.
I think that's cool, even though he should see pictures of it and stuff.
Well, yeah, like he should have the schematic of the ship in his brain.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, I guess maybe having never been on it and just seeing it on paper, like, you know, you think it's huge, but then you get there and you're like, oh, it's just full of stuff.
But it was just fun. I like it. It's like, oh, right. He's never been there because he can't leave the medical bay.
Right.
Even though I'm sure if he can do holodeck programs, he can make a pixel-perfect representation of the bridge in the holodeck, which apparently he's never done. So,
well, this is only the second time that he's been on the holodeck, and both times I think this is also the last time he's on the holodeck, but oh no, he goes many times after this. We've seen him in the opera room.
I think he goes.
Yeah. In the opera room because, you know.
Opera room?
Yeah, that's what I said.
He does sing opera.
Well, yeah, like he auditioned for that one lady, or not, he didn't audition for, he auditioned that one lady, and we spent like 5 minutes about her technique and why it was all wrong and how he just didn't want to perform with her anymore. You remember that? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
All those things that make Voyager great.
Opera auditions. Next time on Voyager.
That's how they pitched it.
Next.
Opera auditions in space.
Although a space opera audition does sort of imply something different than what we actually get.
True story. Yes.
Is Star Trek a space opera? If you were to think of the whole long canon of Star Trek, you'd have to say yes, right?
Yeah. If you're talking about Star Trek, the end, then like yes.
Right.
Yeah. So many tangents. I forgot what I was going to say. So let's keep going.
Well, okay. So the EMH goes to the bridge. The doctor, I should start calling him the doctor. The doctor goes to the bridge, and he finds an unconscious Janeway. So he lifts her off the ground into an upright position. And I was thinking to myself, how does a EMH work in that he can he lift unlimited amount of pounds? He can obviously hold tricorders and stuff like that, so he can manipulate the material world,
right?
But is there a limit to, like, is he the strongest person on the ship by far?
I would imagine that yes, probably, because he is more than likely, as an EMH, he's more than likely designed to be able to lift a person onto a medical bed if necessary. And so he's probably programmed to lift like upwards of 300, 400 pounds.
Well, and why would it stop there? Why not make him be able to lift unlimited amount of pounds? If it is sort of like a holodeck where any amount of force can be applied to any other thing, then why not just he can lift anything? He could essentially lift whatever he needs to within the ship.
That's true. But I would say that there's more power in a holodeck than there is in the hollow emitters in the medical room.
Maybe, but I mean, I don't know the difference between a hollow emitter and the holodeck. I mean, has anybody ever gone into that? Like what the difference is?
No, but
this is super nerdy.
I know. But again, I would assume that the holodeck is devoted to hollow emitters, whereas the hollow emitters are strategically placed around the sickbay to make sure that he can be everywhere at all times. Now, having said that, and well, probably because of the battery power, but I was going to say, why not just make the sickbay a holodeck, and that way you don't have to have anything like brought to you or make sure you have these materials. Like, I guess because once you leave, all the medicine leaves your body, and And that's not good.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're starting to get to the edge of how a holodeck works and the fact that it's science fiction and all that stuff. I mean, I would say that it's unclear since it's just a holographic being, and the holo emitters are only in charge of producing his hologram and maybe one other hologram. That would not necessarily pose a power problem of him lifting whatever he wanted to, versus when you're in a holodeck, those holo emitters have to generate literally everything. And so that's where all the power goes to, and why force and mass and everything goes into it. I would love to have seen this idea explored where he's carrying 4 or 5 people,
Right.
In some emergency or something like that on his back and saying, I'm going to sick bay, hop on, That would be cool, right?
Well,
I feel like that's something that they would do in the modern Star Trek or in Lower Decks or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the other part of it too is you would think that yes, the doctor needs to have a pleasant appearance to make the patients feel comfortable, but conversely, he should also be able to change his appearance as is needed. So like if there's
so he turns into a forklift or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, like he adds more arms, or his arms get longer so he can grab things around the room or something.
That's a great idea. Or just a bed materializes in front of him.
Yeah,
but he could operate on mobily. Like he'd be walking down a corridor, operating, theoretically speaking.
Well, and at that
that's
point,
right. Because why would his form be limited to a human form?
Right.
Why couldn't he just be a cat operating on somebody?
Yeah.
Why did they not explore this?
Well,
this would be so awesome.
I think there's lots of budgetary reasons why that was not explored.
I guess it'd be really expensive to train a cat to hold a tricorder and stuff like that.
Yeah, right? And we would spend 20 minutes on them just getting them to open the tricorder because they don't have thumbs.
That would be so great. It's literally a minute of the cat trying to open the little flap on the tricorder.
Pawing at it, using its claw, and it just keeps clicking open and shut.
That would be the best. And it almost gets it. And it gets upset. Oh, that would be the best 1.5 minutes. Okay. So anyway.
That didn't happen.
That didn't happen. The cat, the doctor taking the form of a cat did not happen.
Right.
He stayed the doctor.
Spending a minute to try and open a tricorder, that did happen in the episode. It was great.
Yeah. Great. We thought it'd be funny if we took away your thumbs. We realize not a great prank to play in this specific moment.
Oh, man. That would have been an amazing running joke throughout Voyager. If that's why the doctor didn't like Paris, because he kept playing some prank on him
He's so great.
in his medical programming, or his programming in general.
See, now that would have been a Star Trek episode because what would happen is the ensign would want to stop doing it because morally he found a problem with it.
Right.
He's like, we can't just keep torturing this person,
But I think they only mention it, every 4 episodes or so. So it's not something that they constantly mention. But every time we see the doctor, there's something different,
Or it gives him little baby hands.
Yeah.
Very small.
Just every time. One episode he's got baby hands, or just one baby hand. Another episode, he's missing a pinky, which is obnoxious, but you can still completely function. Another episode, he smells oranges everywhere he goes. Another episode, he's missing a tooth.
So I feel like this is all should be covered by Lower Decks. This sounds like such a Lower Decks type of scenario.
Right.
How can we turn Star Trek into comedy?
Yeah.
So then Neelix calls the doctor and Janeway on the bridge, and Neelix is apparently in some sort of battle with what's the name of the terrible people?
Curzon?
Curzon?
No, it's Kazon.
Kazon. I want to say Kalis. It's like, well, that would have been a good one.
So Neelix is battling Kalis. B'Elanna's having a huge crisis of faith.
Right. Oh, God. See, we always make it a little bit better on this show.
But I feel like at that point the doctor would totally know that something's going on. He's like, wait a minute.
Well, it's like when you're in a dream, anything, no matter how ridiculous, is part of the narrative and you buy it, so maybe not.
What if I actually can't believe they've never done that, where they did an episode where things are just ridiculous. And it's another character focused episode. And the person just goes along with it, despite, this would have to be a season 4 or season 5 episode where we know the practices and we know the expectations and standards and all that kind of thing. And nothing is right. And the person just goes along with it. And
that's kind of what happens in Next Gen in an episode called Parallels, where Worf, things keep changing around Worf. Now, granted, he is aware of them and notices that they're strange, but that's kind of what that is.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like the person notices them, but doesn't think they're strange. They just accept them. You know, like they're fish swimming around in engineering, and they don't care. And make it an actual nightmare episode where things like get worse and worse. Something is chasing them. They can't run away. And right before it gets to them, they just wake up, and that's the end of the episode.
I would be so pissed.
But you would have to know, like, from the beginning, the fact that things are weird and they're just accepting them. Like, I don't know. You're right. I think never mind. That's probably a bad idea.
Well, it's one of those things where, we don't get an actual science fiction explanation. It's just he woke up from a dream. I'd be so pissed. I wouldn't be pissed at the direction of that, where it just turns into this giant nightmare. But the fact that they solved it by somebody just waking up, I'd have to stop watching and renounce Star Trek at that point.
All because of one episode.
Yeah, that's how extreme.
Wow.
That would be.
Well, yeah. I hope we don't run into an episode that does that for you. Like, in 13 years, we have only like 96 episodes left to go. And you're like, nope, that's it. I'm out.
I know, right? I think that... Oh, by the way, I wanted to point out that I think we have... If you were to line all of our episodes up in a line in terms of a season, we've watched like 2.5 seasons worth of Star Trek at this point.
Yeah, right about.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of seasons that we have to get through, but I don't know. It seems like we're making a dent in the old episode list.
Right. So how many seasons are there? There's 28. Yeah, 28 of the old. Anyway. That's definitely staying on the podcast.
So anyway, Neelix then, to help... whatever. What am I talking about? The doctor to
gets
help
shot.
Neelix. No, not yet.
Okay, sorry.
So he transports to the mess hall to help Neelix. And I was thinking, okay, now this is starting to feel like a video game where you have all of these little different set pieces that you have to solve a mission. Now your mission, the doctor, is to go to the mess hall and help Neelix fight this bad guy.
Right.
And then you have to fight the bad guy. And then once you finish that, Neelix is going to send you off on a different mission. That's kind of what it felt like.
Totally, yeah.
I was like, I would have totally played this game, by the way. Sounds awesome.
We have very different tastes in video games, apparently.
I loved those video games. They were very prevalent, I think, in the 90s. Kind of a la Wing Commander, where it was live action stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a couple Star Trek ones that even William Shatner was in.
Oh,
where
nice.
you would actually, it would be live action shots that they would had stitched together based on whatever decisions you made throughout the game. And it was fun. I love that kind of stuff. Really, it has not gone there. I mean, everyone's like, this is the future. Video games is just going to be this. It's going to be movies that you choose the ending on. That never happened. But it was fun. Nonetheless, it was a video game. A nice little video game. So the doctor is afraid when he's having to help Neelix capture the Kazon or hit the Kazon. I don't know why the doctor would be afraid. In fact, in later episodes, he proves to not be afraid when everyone else is in peril.
Right.
Or in danger, where he's even in danger. He has a nice poise to him. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this one, he seems to be afraid. And maybe that's part of the programming, whatever, but... I don't know. I like it when he's the only one in a crisis when he just is totally calm and he still cracks jokes.
Yeah. Well, and they even showed in one of the first few episodes that he can set his appearance to be holographic, so he wouldn't even get hurt in those scenes. Like, he could easily just lower his settings and be able to talk to everybody and understand what he needs to do to help them without having any risk of being impacted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like Data with his motion chip, whatever.
Right.
Make a pretty good captain, if you ask me. But on this ship, it's not a tall order. So anyway, then he realizes he gets hurt somehow, and then he transfers himself back to the medical base where he can run his own diagnostics. Then he realizes that everybody else is a hologram, but he himself is a real boy.
I genuinely enjoyed the reveal there, where Janeway says "computer end all holographic programs."
Just And then I was like, oh, maybe she was a hologram all the time.
That would explain
That's
so
interesting.
much. That explains why she's
So
the
many
smartest. That explains why she's never actually drinking her coffee or tea. She's just always holding it.
So this is the point where I kind of felt like, okay, so there's something really wrong here.
Right.
And there has to be, we have to now start, the doctor realizes that there's something wrong. And so now we're like, okay, good. So he's going to figure out something's wrong. And we're going to kind of start the B plot, not the B plot, but the next part of the plot.
Right.
And to see where is this mystery going? Because I was still kind of on board at this point. Even though it had turned into a video game, I was kind of like, oh, what's going to happen next?
Right. Like, why is this happening? Yeah.
Right. And then Barclay shows up. Lieutenant Barclay.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like, oh, I didn't know that. I was very surprised. I think I've even seen this episode before.
I don't remember this episode at all. That was...
Oh, you don't?
No.
Yeah. Then it gets... The episode turns into this just monologue after monologue after monologue of one character trying to convince another character of something that is unprovable and unfalsifiable. Where you're just going to have to take my word for it. This, and this, and this, and this. And the doctor's like, well, what about this, and this? It's like, look, you're just going to have to trust me. And you can try this out. Try this unprovable thing that you could just simulate anyway.
Right.
You know, that's the thing with, if you're saying you're in a holodeck, we know that holodecks can be programmed to do anything.
Right.
So, and he even says that the safety protocols are off. So that even greatly releases the limits of the capabilities of the holodeck.
Right.
So the idea that, oh, look, you can, if you're in the ship, you can shoot the holomatrix thing, and that's going to prove to you. And it's like, no, why couldn't you just simulate the fact that happens, but nothing happens? Like, why you can just program all this? But they go through. It's like the whole back end of the episode is just one monologue after other monologue of this happening.
Yeah.
It's like it stops short.
Regardless of what was happening with him, like why was the warp core such a big deal? Because there are no hollow emitters in the engineering, so he was not actually at the warp core. So like whether or not he blew it up and quote unquote destroyed Voyager, or he left it alone and did nothing, like I don't understand why everyone was so nervous for this one way or the other. Like why was Chakotay telling him not to?
So they transport the doctor back in time to the first time he was, as you were saying, that he was initiated.
Right.
And this is where they get the part where the caretaker pushes them into the Delta Quadrant or whatever. So just as an aside, I think Barclay calls the caretaker Banjo Man.
No, the doctor does. Yeah, the caretaker, also known as the Banjo Man. And the reason why is because in the pilot, in the first part of the pilot, the credits list him as Banjo Man because he's never identified as the caretaker.
See, I was wondering. I was thinking to myself, is this a reference to fan nomenclature?
Right, and it kind of was.
Right, because that's what he was credited as.
Yeah.
So it was a reference to something that happened outside of the canon of the show.
Right.
That's awesome.
Which now makes it canon, yes.
Yeah, which makes it canon for some reason, you know. Why? Nobody ever called him Banjo Man. Nobody.
True.
So, but I like that. We could see that they were reading the community online boards,
right?
You know?
Yeah, because
like that.
Those were a thing now. Yeah.
So at this point, Chakotay tries to stop him from destroying the warp core, as you said, and there's so much now reporting of information and absolutely no discovery of information. Everything is just being told to the doctor. They're trying to convince him one way or the other, and we're getting no new information. Just, you know, you're in trouble. You're having issues with your hollow matrix, and we're trying to repair it. It's like the scene from Total Recall that takes 3 minutes,
right?
Where they're trying to convince him that you got to take this pill and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But except that's half an hour.
Right.
You know?
Right. The part that was frustrating about that for me was no one, kind of what you just said, but nobody was providing new information. Like, it's not just that they were all dumping it on him. Like, they were all saying the same thing. It was just that Barclay said, you need to destroy the warp core, and Chakotay said, don't do anything.
Right. And that was it. That was the crux of the entire problem.
Yeah. And to make it even worse, the doctor even acknowledges that he's already been told this. Like, Chakotay goes through everything, and he's like, yes, I know. He just said the same thing. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and I felt like they just stopped writing.
Right.
It was sort of a, how can I say this in a different way? And
like, Chakotay accidentally said Barclay's lines, and the doctor is trying to cover for him. Like, when that happens on
nobody
stage.
noticed. Yeah.
No,
even when they were shooting it.
He just told me that. I believe you meant to say...
As though they shot this live in one take.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It just sort of de-escalated, and I just got more bored and more bored. Just because I was like, oh, nothing's happening. Like, this is the same stuff over and over again. And then it kind of got interesting where he thinks he wakes up from the dream, and then he's still dreaming because Kes kind of becomes
his wife,
not Kes.
Yeah, and she totally overreacting and like running over to him and wrapping her arms around him, and she's like, I still love you, we can still make it work.
Right. I was thinking to myself, okay, so now I know he's still in a thing. There's no mystery here.
Right.
I know what's going on.
Right.
And I don't know, I was kind of always ahead of this episode. Never was I thinking, I can't wait to see what happens next, except for maybe at the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like after Barkley shows up, we're still waiting to figure out like what exactly the problem is. Because I honestly, up until the very end, I thought that there was some kind of malevolent force of a holographic planet or an alien race that was able to project, like read the computer's archives and profiles and find these people and project them to the Doctor to try to get the Doctor to destroy Voyager.
Right.
And
I agree.
That's kind of where I thought it was going. So
me too.
The fact that at the end it really was, he was on the holodeck and somehow his program got stuck in the holodeck and they've been trying to reach him for however many hours. Like, I still don't understand why his psyche basically was telling him to blow up the ship. And not blow up the ship.
Yeah, there was no... because there wasn't any rhyme or reason to what was going on. It was like a dream.
Yeah.
There wasn't... See, I think the way to make this better is have there be some sort of clever accumulation and culmination of clues throughout the episode that he then builds to a realization of what's going on.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. That's how an X-Gen would work.
Yeah.
They slowly get these clues and put them together into something, And
right. But that's not what you said before, or... This wasn't here before. Yeah.
I was totally expecting that conversation. It's like, wait a minute, you said that this, and this, but this is how this works over here. And I think one of the more interesting parts of this whole episode is their use of Barkley, because I thought that ties it to Star Trek. Because if it was just, or rather to realism, because I thought that if it was going to be something where it was an alien race or some other sort of hijinks like that they wouldn't have used Barkley. They would have used somebody who was just crewman that we don't know.
Right.
And so I thought that was misleading, but not in a cool way. It was just, oh, look at this actor that we've seen before.
Right. Mm-hmm. One thing that was really interesting about this was it was directed by Jonathan Frakes. I don't know if you saw that or not. And this episode introduced him to Robert Picardo. And it gave him a chance to kind of see Robert Picardo and Dwight Schultz working together. And the three of them actually got along so well that this was one of the episodes that Paramount looked at to consider Frakes for directing First Contact. And because he had worked with Picardo, he was actually able to call him and say, hey, we have this part on the Enterprise where I would love to have you come on as the EMH and just do a quick cameo scene. And because they knew each other at that point, Picardo was like, sure, I'd be happy to. Right. And then the same thing for having Barkley as a cameo to meet Zefram Cochrane, I think is what happens. I don't remember him in the movie at all, but apparently he's there in one scene.
He has like one scene.
Yeah. And the same thing. Like he was called on Tuesday and say, hey, can you show up on Friday? Frakes kind of asked him if he could be there because it was just supposed to be some random engineer, and Frakes was like, oh no, it needs to be Barkley. Like that's a great callback, and that's exactly what his character would do, so let's do that.
Yeah, that was great.
So
I love those two moments in First Contact.
Yeah, so this episode, those things happened because of this episode. So there was something good that happened because of this episode.
How about that?
Yeah.
And that's from Frakes himself?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, and then the episode ends by Kes playing a fairly cruel joke on the Doctor, where I forget what she says, but she sort of indicates or implies that he's still in some sort of simulation of himself. I feel like, what a cruel joke to play on somebody. You know? Like,
well, kind of. I mean, she also doesn't know everything that he experienced or like how traumatizing it was for him. But I don't remember that. I remember her saying like, let's keep Neelix out of this. He doesn't need to know about our love affair. But
I wish I could remember.
Right.
But she says something that implied that he was still in the simulation, and I just feel like too soon. Maybe?
Right.
I don't know. I know he's a computer, but
it's also classic Star Trek. The single punchline at the end.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Like Scotty saying it'll be no tribble at all when he causes a huge war between the Klingons and the Federation by beaming all the tribbles over there.
Forgot about that. Yeah. You need the punchline. You need the freeze frame punchline.
Right? Where the criminal goes sneaking off, which is another timely and current reference. Way to bookend the episode with those things.
And popular. Wow. Everybody knows that one.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I feel like even if there wasn't an alien, I feel like there should have been an explanation for why him destroying the Enterprise in the holodeck program was such a problem, or why he wanted to, well, I mean, both actually, why he wanted to destroy the Voyager in the first place.
Or would it have mattered anyway?
Right.
In the story that Barclay was purporting, it did matter, but would it have mattered if he destroyed a pretend Enterprise, Voyager, or Enterprise? Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, they're completely interchangeable. They're just as good. You could pick.
Well, I mean, for the sake of this episode, it would have been a pretend one anyway, so it doesn't matter. So, what does it? Did it matter at all? Did any of this matter because it was a simulation?
Right.
I mean, I think they were saying there were problems with his matrix or something. I don't remember. It was so.
Well, yeah, there was a feedback loop which was degenerating his memory. And Chakotay said, "Do nothing. We are working on getting you out." And Barclay was saying, "He's lying. You have to destroy the warp core so we can bring you back to reality." And my question is, what does it matter which one he did?
Right. Yeah. It's all a simulation.
Yeah.
And the problems were happening from outside, like that radiation they were talking about, keto metric.
Yeah.
The doctor's very heavy on the keto diet. If he was having radiation from outside of the hologram, so it's not like anything that he was doing was going to cause the problem. That was out of his control.
Right. Well, yeah, and Chakotay never said if you destroy the warp core in the holodeck, it's going to, end the program abruptly, and we will not be able to retrieve your file. You will be gone forever, or something like that, where there actually was a reason to question either of them.
Right.
But he was just saying, don't do anything. We've almost got you. And it's like, well, why don't I go ahead and destroy the warp core? And if I'm real, that will solve everything. And if I'm not, you will get me out when you're done anyway.
It just wasn't clever, ultimately.
Yeah.
They just weren't clever about their scenario.
Yeah. Which, again, so Brandon Braga wrote the script for this one. And I feel like that's kind of what happens. He comes up with this idea, and the idea was, what if, kind of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. So what if the doctor kind of goes through an existential crisis, trying to figure out whether or not he's real or is he a hologram. And that was the question that was presented and asked and answered, but they didn't think about how to make the story more interesting. They were presenting things to go around that question instead of explaining those things that they were presenting that went around the question. Do you get what I'm saying?
I don't think that, but to me, I don't think the theme was, I think, therefore I am I a person or a hologram? I don't think any of that. He does say those things, and they bounce back and forth as to whether or not he's a hologram or a real person. But I didn't feel like that was part of the end. He doesn't realize this at the end of the episode, that I am, in fact, a real person no matter what form I take, whether it's a table or a cat or a human.
That's true.
That never really gets solved or even addressed in any kind of material way.
Well, and he just realizes on the holodeck that yes, he is the emergency medical hologram, and that's kind of the end of it.
I don't look at this as a character episode.
Right.
I don't think he is confronted with any big questions about his origins or what he's meant to do.
No, he absolutely is, but it's just when it ends, he doesn't say, I am, even though I am a hologram. I mean, the Chakotay says this, it doesn't matter if you're light or you're flesh and blood, you're still a person. It matters, what you do that defines you as a person or whatever. But then at the end, like he doesn't repeat that back or anything. Like he's just like, I'm the doctor. I'm the emergency medical hologram.
Yeah, but was he having trouble with that before? I mean, I think over the course of Voyager, he does grapple with this.
Oh, absolutely.
As what am I?
Yeah.
But I just didn't get that from this episode. I feel like they were telling us this.
Well, right.
But
He was not having the crisis of faith other than, or the existential crisis, other than people telling him that he was a real person, you know, and he was like, well, I have such a hard time believing that because I have these memories, and you know, and Barclay was like, yes, those all have been implanted in your brain because of this weird thing that happened in a holodeck.
It was just the Total Recall thing.
Yeah,
that's all it felt like.
Yeah,
that didn't seem
right.
Yeah,
he was not having an existential crisis. An existential crisis was being thrust on him.
Well, in terms of his existence, yes, that was the crisis, but not sort of a what am I here for?
Right.
Although it's interesting that this seems like the type of episode that would kick something like that off for him, but it didn't. He didn't get to the end of it and sort of questioning, I need to do more. Like, I'm not going to just turn myself off anymore. I'm going to play cards or read or something and try and grow a bit, kind of like Data.
Yeah, that would have been cool. That would have been good.
But he doesn't.
Right.
I didn't get the sense that he grew at all. I think he was just like, oh, well, I had a bad dream. The end.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is a proper Star Trek episode. I don't think it was a terrible episode. I don't think I would ever go back and rewatch it. It just didn't, like the beginning. Maybe I'll rewatch the cold open and just sort of dream.
Well, and watch until Barclay shows up and be like, oh yeah, and then just turn it off.
Oh yeah, damn it. And I love Barclay. I thought to myself when he first showed up, I was like, oh cool. How are they tying this in? How is this working? Because he does come back. Barclay does come back in Voyager later as actual Barclay,
right,
in the whatever quadrant, Alpha Quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking, oh, that's early. Maybe this happened way earlier than I thought it did. Maybe this is they're trying to communicate with Voyager, and this is the only way they could through some sort of radiation. Blah blah blah. Nope.
Right. Nope. It's all in his mind.
So what do you think?
Well, I'm saying yes, just because you know there are things that happened in this episode that could only happen with a holographic imaging, and you know even though it was being forced upon him, he still had the moral dilemma of, am I real or am I a machine? You know, and so I think that it does hit all three of our criteria. And
what was the novel technology thing though, or I should say science fiction?
Just the jumping back and forth with the holograms, like he, you know, the like I said, the Janeway part where she's, you know, saying computer and program, and everybody disappears.
Yeah, perhaps this episode preempted all of the other episodes where we don't know who's a hologram and who isn't, and where there are characters who are, for example, actually I should say, there's a TNG episode that we thought we were watching that we didn't end up watching, which is sort of the introduction of Barclay, where it starts out with Barclay sort of being kind of a badass, he had like,
oh yeah, and it turns out it's all in the holodeck, yeah,
right,
yeah.
And that's sort of the same thing. So I felt like when I saw this episode and it turns out that all the characters that I thought were real were actually holograms, wasn't particularly novel or interesting, just because I felt like it had been done before. And I don't know, I think this is maybe perhaps a flaw in our criteria, that we have to agree objectively on all three criteria, that our criteria is built that way, because ultimately ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas are subjective. And so the criteria is not constructed in such a way where we would necessarily always come to the same conclusion based on data from the episode. So I don't think there's a moral dilemma in this episode. Perhaps the first criteria of, is there science fiction? Yes. I mean, it would be hard for me to argue that there's not. But the novelty of it, I'm not convinced about, and nor am I convinced that there's actually a moral dilemma faced, other than I have to make a decision. I have to choose A or B, and they both seem to be equally weighted, and I don't know who to trust. It just seems like it was badly written, and so that's why I'm having trouble coming down on this. So I don't know. This may be a lopsided outcome for us. What?
Well,
again,
right. So for I've mentioned this before, but for me, the second one is more, does it subvert tropes and stereotypes? You know, so like when we're watching it, it's the sci-fi is is presented as the Deus Ex Machina. You know, that's the only sci-fi in the episode is this thing that we've never seen before. Can they bring this in? Like, and even if they use technobabble to explain it and it's a way that makes sense, it's still, if it's brought up at the end, Deus Ex Machinas are a weak way of solving things. And it's basically magic being used at the end. I'm trying to think of another one where... Like it just when you watch it and you kind of roll your eyes and you're like, oh, they're doing this, you know, and it's not something that we've seen it's something that we've seen in Star Trek before, yes, but it's something that we've seen in several other places as well. You know, and that's kind of where it's not being creative or original. They are just using something to either get to the end of the episode like they did in this one, which is a point against it, or it's, you know, it's something that is just stereotypically sci-fi, you know, and it's not unique to Star Trek in any way. You know, we've kind of already talked about this, how the original series has a leg up on that because most of the time it's going to be the first time it's been done on television. But regardless of that, you know, like on when we see it, you know, if we're like, and they do this because that's what you do when you want to solve this, I feel like that immediately takes it out of the running of being proper Star Trek because we know what's going to happen, or it's just lazy writing. But as for the moral dilemma, I mean, you know, yes, it's bad writing, but I feel like you can't argue that the Doctor's not having okay. So you're saying there's not really a moral dilemma, but you're not arguing that he didn't have an existential crisis.
No, I think he had a crisis of his existence in that sense.
Right. But there's not really...
the same...
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think he's like... He was not struggling with his existence before this or after this.
No, right. And his choice didn't change anything.
And we're not really clear on if it would have anyway.
Well, right. That's what I mean. Yeah, like whether or not which one he chose didn't matter because neither of them were saying you can't choose this one. He's having a moral dilemma there as to which one do I choose because the script told him to have a moral dilemma. Like the information being presented does not provide a moral dilemma. I see. Like I was thinking the existential crisis as being the moral dilemma, but you're right. That's something else completely.
But see, I think the reason that we're having so much trouble is not because we are having trouble deciphering the episode, is I think there's not enough information to decipher anything. It's just bad. That's why it's bad writing, is that we don't have anything to sink our teeth into.
Right. Well, yeah, and so I feel like this episode you dug deep enough for it to be a no, and I wasn't. I was just looking at the surface, and I was thinking that it's a yes.
But even there, it was sort of a case of the unreliable narrator,
right?
Where they kept changing the rules, because when he says, "Is there anybody on board? Are there any life signs on board?" They said no. So, but he should have been a life sign. So they should have said, "Yeah, one person, Armin Zimmerman." No, whatever his name is, Zimmerman.
Right.
So they kept changing the rules, and so it's very difficult to keep track of these things in terms of trying to, talk about the episode.
Yeah,
like this.
No, that's true. That's true. Which I guess it would be the unique way, like if you're changing the rules every act, like, yeah, that's a unique way of presenting the problem.
I guess.
But I agree that, by the letter of the law, there is no moral dilemma. I guess just in my head up until now, I've just been seeing it as an internal struggle that the person has to face. And up until now, it's always been an ethical or moral dilemma. In this case, it's not. It's just an existential crisis. And I'm willing to keep our rules consistent and say, since we've been saying ethical and moral dilemma up until now, this episode is not proper Star Trek. But then I just present to you, like, do you want to keep it as ethical or moral dilemma, or do you want to make it a little bit vaguer and just say that there's when the character is facing an internal struggle?
Well, but that would be applicable to any character anywhere in any show. Is that theoretically any character should be going through some sort of struggle. And that would disqualify a lot of episodes because there isn't necessarily a character arc. And I think that a lot of science fiction does not have character arcs. I don't think that should be a criteria for something being a Star Trek episode. I actually kind of like it when there isn't a character arc sometimes. What's the character arc in timescape.
Well,
you know?
right, and that's why I argued that it wasn't one, because there wasn't a moral dilemma. There was just the problems that needed to be solved.
Not moral dilemma, but a character arc.
Well, right.
Right? Like, I mean, I'm just using that as a what would be, we would both agree as science fiction, as really good science fiction, not as a proper Star Trek episode. But that's a really good science fiction episode.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons is because they don't spend time giving a character an arc over the course of the episode.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to disqualify episodes like that just because there isn't a character arc.
Okay. But, I mean, that makes it great sci-fi, but making it Star Trek has to deal with the fact that there is some kind of ethical or moral dilemma that the characters are facing.
Right. I'm fine with there being a broad ethical or moral dilemma, but narrow or I guess broadening that to, well, a character has to be dealing with something. I don't feel like that's what Roddenberry was thinking when he said that Star Trek is about morality and ethics. I don't think that's what he meant.
Right. No. And I would agree with that. It's just, having an episode, like, because now that I think about it, I feel like the Crusher episode isn't really going to have an ethical or moral dilemma.
Maybe not.
Like, just based on my memory of it. And, so like this episodes like this where there is clearly a character who is struggling, or like the episode where Riker, thinks that he's going crazy. He keeps like jumping back and forth between two worlds or something.
Yeah.
The same thing. Like he's definitely having a crisis, but there's no dilemma in that episode. So that would make it not proper Star Trek either.
Well, let's put it this way. In this episode, what moral conviction or lack thereof does the Doctor have or battle with?
No, none. That's my point. Like that would disqualify it based on the moral or ethical dilemma. But I feel like there are some great Star Trek episodes that deal with the person's understanding of the world without actually having them question their morality or ethics.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. We'd have to treat it with a case-by-case basis, but I don't think a person struggling existentially is not the same thing as them proceeding with some sort of moral conviction,
right,
or ethical conviction. And I like there being. I think that's what Roddenberry was after.
I agree. I agree.
Does Picard kill? Does he, like in that episode, A Matter of Time?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of an interesting moral dilemma,
right? Which
was act and 10,000 people will die. Don't act, and millions of people could die. That's a very interesting moral dilemma.
Right.
And that's I think what Roddenberry meant.
Yeah, and I agree. So I feel like I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like we should put a pin in this episode until we come across another episode that is like a Next Generation, or maybe even an Enterprise, or some other series, some other episode that is great and knocks the other two out of the park, but then there's not really an ethical or moral dilemma, but there is something about a personal crisis. And like when we come across those again, kind of discuss whether or not they are proper Star Trek, or because they don't hit that third criteria, they're still, because they don't hit the third criteria of ethical or moral dilemma, they're not proper Star Trek.
I think I'm going to make you come down on an answer. We can revisit,
okay,
if we want.
Well, so I mean, just based on the letter of the law, this is not a proper Star Trek episode because there is no moral dilemma. There easily could have been, with Chakotay saying, if you do that, your program will shut down and we cannot save you.
Or what if the dilemma was, we can either save you or the crew? Make a choice.
Right.
Maybe that's a bad choice.
No,
not the whole crew.
But no. That's actually perfect, because that's what the issue should have been. He has to save himself or the crew, and he now has a self-identity. He's not just a program, and he has to make that choice, and he ultimately sacrifices himself, which shuts down his program, which allows him to save the Enterprise. Or not the Enterprise, which allows the Voyager to save his program and reboot it, basically, and bring him back into the holodeck.
Right. That's a dilemma.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yep.
It's not just, do I choose A or B, both of which are equally weighted in information.
Right.
And I just have to make a choice.
Well, and they both have the same result. I will say no to this episode, but it does make me nervous for those two great Next Generation episodes that they're not actually proper Star Trek.
Would you say that you yourself are faced with an ethical dilemma?
Oh, for sure.
Of making the choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Making the what?
Well, I stopped talking mid-word. That never is a good idea. It was supposed to be making the choice.
I know.
It's making the cha.
Yeah. Oh, I just snorted.
And it's staying in. Okay, you want to see what we're watching next?
Yeah, please. Rapture! Season 10, Episode 5 of The Star Trek Deep Space The Nine.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rapture. The blurb says, when Cisco... No, stop. The episode started. Shoot, hang on.
What?
The episode...
What's going on?
The episode started on me. Like, I was trying to read the blurb and...
Oh.
When Cisco sees a painting depicting Bahala, Bajor's legendary lost city, he is inspired to search for the famed site.
Okay. Although I do know we can fall back on that's just the cold open. What else? What other wonderful gems might show up throughout the course of the 9/10 of the other part of the episode?
Oh, I know. Like whenever DS9 comes up and I read the blurb, I'm like, ooh, I wonder what this episode's going to be about because I know it's not that.
There's no bearing on the actual plot line of the show at all. Okay. Well, let's go watch it.
All right. I've been Jonathan.
And I've been Paul.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
As you knew.